Revan left what few Asari leaders that didn't rush off to not so subtly try and contact their patrons back in Citadel space about the annexation of Talrania to the growing core of administrators she and the rest of the Empire would rely on to ensure the growing web of planets would function without her needing to constantly manage every action. She should have simply taken the shuttle back to her flagship and left to handle the hundreds of new problems that were no doubt waiting for her attention, but the possibility of drawing out 3 Force users was too tempting to pass up. Yes, they were probably members of the Pious D offshoot that somehow established itself here, but Revan had clearly surprised them with her arrival. This was likely the best chance she had to make contact before another assassination attempt, which, knowing her luck, would be in the middle of a Reaper invasion. So on the off chance she could lure out some of their members and either convince them to put aside whatever issue they had with her until after the Reapers were dealt with, or learn more about their order and where they were located should she need to deal with them, Revan wandered down one of the more desolate areas while broadcasting her presence in the Force. They might suspect a trap, but most Jedi had a tendency to leap anyway if given a tempting enough target. And with most of her presence veiled, maybe the youngest would. Hold it right there, Sith. Confront her anyway after overestimating their abilities. Revan smiled beneath her visor at the confirmation that younglings in any galaxy were the same and turned to face her attacker. A young Asari in an outfit similar to the Jedi she fought on Ilium, though in a different color, stood in the hallway, an unignited lightsaber in her hand. "Is there something I can help you with, youngling?" You were the one that killed Kayla." "Kayla? The name of the other Jedi I encountered, I assume. Did you know each other?" "She was the one that brought me to the Order. The one that helped me whenever I had a question or my master was busy. And you murdered her." Revan calmly slid the hilt of her own saber into her right hand but didn't ignite it just yet. "Murdered? An interesting accusation, considering the only reason I fought her was because she led a team of huntresses in an assassination attempt on me." The young Asari's Force presence darkened at Revan's bored tone. It was actually quite sad. If Revan actually wanted, all it would take was a few more pushes to make this Padawan, and she was sure she was a Padawan from how undisciplined the girl was, to fall to the dark side. Luckily for the girl, Revan still had little desire for an apprentice at the moment. Less for an unstable dark side user drunk on their own perceived power running about. "Shut up. Kayla didn't deserve to die. Not by some Sith monster." The child snapped as she ignited her lightsaber, the blue beam pointed at Revan's chest. Revan causally ignited her own red one. "And you think you can succeed where she failed? I won't let you just poison this galaxy unopposed." The Padawan cried as she leapt forward. Blue clashed against red in a storm of slashes and cuts as the youngling tried to overwhelm Revan's casual defense with a complex dance of flourishes and acrobatics. The girl wasn't bad, Revan judged. She couldn't really speak to the Padawan's style. It was simply too different for Revan to compare it to the lightsaber forms she was familiar with, but her opponent was able to use her aggressive style without opening herself up too much. But not bad didn't mean Revan couldn't deal with her. She caught her opponent's saber on her own and guided the girl's momentum so she would overshoot her, before mercilessly stepping on the Asari girl's boot and pinning it in place. Off balance and without a way to catch herself from falling, Revan felt the girl's panic in the Force as she made another desperate cut to make Revan back off. The Sith easily redirected the blow, leaving the girl wide open for a riposte. Instead of bisecting the girl, Revan punched out and hit the Padawan with a force push from the hand still holding her own lightsaber. The young Asari was launched off her feet where she slid across the floor for a few feet. A frantic check with her free hand confirmed that she hadn't actually been cut, and Revan felt the panic and fear turn to anger as she glared at the Sith. "You should focus more on your footwork," Revan commented. "Losing your balance with a style like yours is almost guaranteed to kill you. Is this some kind of game to you? If you want to take sincere criticism as a game, then yes, I suppose so." The Padawan took a breath and, mostly, reined in her emotions, rising to her feet and reigniting her lightsaber. Revan noticed she was taking a much more defensive stance. Well, she wanted Revan to be the aggressive one. The Sith Empress marched forward and swung her saber in tight, controlled movements. Ironically, just like the young Padawan, she preferred a much more active fighting style to implacably moving forward and crushing her opponents. But fighting using her normal style without immediately ending the fight would be much harder. Her opponent was a child after all. But even using a slightly unfamiliar style, the difference in experience was too much. Revan hammered at the Padawan's defenses, and soon enough the girl was more focused on stopping the next attack than she was on dodging or trying to attack. Her entire focus was on withstanding the next blow rather than deflecting. She was letting Revan set the entire pace of the fight, whether hoping the Sith would simply tire first or because that was all she could do anymore was up in the air. "Don't lock your arms," Revan critiqued, feinting to the right before sweeping her blade up and around, giving the girl a tap on the opposite shoulder. "It leaves you unable to react quickly." The girl yelped as the red saber kissed her skin, leaving a slight burn. Considering what a lightsaber could really do, it was nothing, but the Padawan clearly realized Revan could have killed her right then and there. Her emotional control unraveled and she sent a desperate force push at Revan to keep her away. But it was so unfocused that even Revan's passive defenses were enough to break the attack. This had gone on long enough. Revan stepped forward and swung her saber once. She ignored the slight gasp from the girl as the red blade effortlessly cut through her target. The Sith waved a hand and a force push dumped the Padawan at the feet of the two new arrivals, 3 impacts clattering on the stone floor. "She has talent. But her discipline could use some work," Revan commented, deactivating her saber and allowing the blade to sink into the hilt. "The next time she runs after an opponent so far out of her league, they might not be content to just cut through her lightsaber's emitter. Showing mercy won't prevent us from doing what the code demands of us," the older of the two said placidly, "but you have my personal thanks for sparing Jinani. She has much room to grow." Revan sighed. "Yes, you Jedi and your unbreakable codes. Or perhaps just you Asari. I've dealt with your kind many times before. However, you may have bested a knight and my Padawan, Sith, but this is Master Ennis Delisa. You're no match for her," the younger one interrupted. "Control yourself, Mile. Don't allow your worry for Jinani to cloud your judgment. Remember, this Sith did not kill her so she could lure us here. She is, at the least, arrogant enough to assume she can fight us both." "Is it really arrogance if she could fight off several masters all at once?" Revan mused silently. She had done so several times in the past. Not that this particular Jedi would know. That said, there is no harm in listening for now. Especially after she made such an effort to draw us to her when we were going to leave, since we had no way to get close with a trio of Dreadnought-class ships in orbit. The Master said even as she stepped around the fallen Padawan and subtly reached for her own saber. "Well, Master Ennis Delisa," Revan began. "I am known as Darth Revan, Empress of the Sith Empire, and I have a warning for you and your order and an offer." "Very well, the warning." "The indoctrination effect Reaper technology has is force-based. Without proper shielding, force sensitives are much more vulnerable than other organics. If I were you, I'd keep the young and those with weaker mental barriers away from it as much as possible. Though with the Reaper's arrival I am not sure how realistic that option actually is. As for the offer, the Reapers are omnicidal machines that will not stop scouring the galaxy until their cycle is complete. I'd like to work together, or at the very least agree to a truce until the Reapers are stopped." There was a spell of silence as the Jedi considered her answer, and Revan started to feel a bit of hope this Jedi sect would actually be reasonable. The older Asari's next words crushed that feeling. "Mile, take Jinani back to the ship and contact the Council. They need to know about the threat to our sisters." "What will you do, Master?" "I will remain here to remove the Sith. Even if the Reapers are here and as dangerous as she says, the code remains clear. We cannot allow the Sith to establish themselves and spread," she said as she drew her lightsaber. "We would save the galaxy from one threat only to lose it to the one we let fester. But Master, go. I will join you later." Revan watched as the knight reluctantly pulled the youngling to her feet and helped her stagger back the way they came, but made no effort to stop them. There wasn't much point in giving a warning and then preventing the messenger from spreading the message. She did wonder about their code, though. Samara had been just as zealously devoted to the Justicar code, and only some quick talking from Shepard had stopped them from fighting. Revan now wished she had at least talked to the Justicar when she had the chance. It might have given her some insight on how to approach this encounter more favorably. "I'm surprised a proclaimed master would be so unbending. Do the Jedi of this galaxy not focus on fostering peace and cooperation then?" Revan asked, calling her second lightsaber to her hand but leaving them both inactive. "You took my warning seriously, so you at least have some idea how much of a threat the Reapers are. Would cooperating with me truly be so impossible?" "We could have possibly worked together," Ennis acknowledged. "But not after what you've done." "I was unaware I'd done anything unforgivable. I wasn't talking about a specific action, but what you have created. That empire of yours, what happens after the Reapers?" "How do you mean?" Revan deflected. To be honest, she hadn't really considered after all that much. She was far too busy trying to hold two races that had been at war with each other for 3 centuries by force of will and scrambling to prepare for the aforementioned omnicidal race of starships to make too many solid plans. "It's fairly simple, from our point of view at least. Should we survive the Reapers, you will be protected behind a military only the major Citadel races have a chance of defeating. You are already protected by one actually," she said, looking up to where one of the Harrowers could be seen hovering over the city. "Eventually you will draw other Force sensitives to you and will likely teach them, twisting them to your will. In order to prevent you from creating a never-ending stream of Sith acolytes, you must be slain. And I know you will rarely allow yourself to be this vulnerable in the future I have seen." Revan nearly growled. An image of a brown-haired Jedi flashing through her mind. A sister in all but blood who turned on her because of a future vision of what if. Fine. If that was the path they wanted to choose, then there is no point in talking any longer. Snap hiss. 3 lightsabers ignited at the same time and the fight was on. Revan tilted her head to the side to avoid the blue saber being thrust at her face. Nearly the same second the beam of contained plasma missed, her left saber beat it away with a small circular motion while her right slashed diagonally upward. Ennis recovered quickly by sidestepping out of the way of the first strike and parrying the follow-up. An aura of biotic energy formed around the Jedi. The Force screamed a warning and Revan jumped up, somersaulting over the Asari as a massive shockwave lashed out where she had just been. If the Sith Lady had been less of a duelist, the following stab might have caught her midair, but Revan felt the attack coming and deflected it with a swipe of her sabers. The moment her feet touched the floor, she launched herself back at the Asari. The air shrieked as the 3 lightsabers clashed over and over. A complicated dance that only went faster as the 2 opponents learned more about the other and began trying new things to gain an advantage. Slash, parry, stab, block, jump to avoid symbiotic technique, slash, slash again, parry, counterattack. Revan could definitely say this Asari Jedi was better than the one she killed on Ilium. And the thought of killing such a capable fighter when the Reapers were practically right around the corner was such a waste that the Empress definitely considered trying to convince the Jedi to surrender, or failing that, knock her out so Revan could make a better effort later. Whether or not that was a realistic goal was another matter, however. Another shockwave from the Asari shattered the floor around them as Revan once again jumped out of the way. She barely had time to twist and throw out a hand to deflect a few floor shards Ennis had telekinetically grabbed and threw after her. More shards floated around the Asari Jedi and Revan decided to make the Master regret trying to challenge her in a battle of Force powers. Force lightning erupted from her fingertips and quickly disintegrated the rock shield. Ennis moved in front of her, but Revan wasn't done. She focused on the scene in front of her, and while the Jedi was powerful and skilled enough that Revan couldn't directly target and throw her without considerable effort on the Sith side, that didn't stop Revan from tearing out a section of wall and throwing that at the Asari. Ennis handled it in stride, however. Before the chunk of masonry could even threaten the Jedi, a biotic shockwave followed by a series of force pushes reduced the wall to rubble long before it came close to crushing the Jedi. Only a small handful of debris even came close, and that was easily deflected by a combination of biotic and force powers followed by the occasional lightsaber swing. Power and control, Revan mused in her head. A rare, and annoying, combination in her foes. And as much as she would like to let the duel play out, Revan couldn't spend a large amount of time playing around. The noise alone would draw attention, and even if the local leaders had agreed to follow her, the general populace would likely side with the Jedi based on the Justicar uniform alone. This needed to be brought to a close. Revan briefly closed her eyes and for the first time during the fight, actively empowered and immersed herself in the Force. Ennis was instantly on guard as light and shadow seemed to bend oddly around the Sith, completely focused on Revan as the Sith ran towards her. The Sith Empress fainted low and lunged forward with a Force-empowered leap that Ennis barely managed to throw herself out of the way of, her sleeve smoking where Revan's blade almost scorched her arm. The Jedi Master's eyes widened at the near miss and she tried to fall back and get some distance. Revan replied by hurling her blue saber after the fleeing Asari, forcing her to make a slightly desperate parry. Revan prepared to rush the opening in her opponent's guard, but a flash of warning caused her to dive to the side instead. A shard of jagged rock passed through the area she just was heading straight for Ennis. Even panicked, the Jedi had managed to set a trap for the Empress that likely would have caught most Force adepts, Jedi or Sith, off guard. Especially when Ennis turned the shard of rock into a makeshift grenade by exploding it with a biotic technique Revan didn't immediately recognize, but in her enhanced state Revan simply raised a hand and erected a force barrier. The shards of stone bounced harmlessly off of before charging forward again. Her lone saber chopped down. Ennis raised her own as best she could, but her injured arm buckled under the force of the attack. Red clashed and slid against blue as Revan drove her saber down, intent on disarming her opponent. Literally if she needed to, at the last moment Ennis threw a desperate force push at Revan, which she simply anchored herself and allowed to pass around her, but was actually a clever way to propel the Jedi Master away from Revan's saber before it cut her. Very clever actually, Revan noted. In her experience very few Force users would hit themselves with their own technique to avoid an attack. And most of those were Malak Sith acolytes too stupid to properly control their powers. But clever only got you so far. Especially when you ended up disorientating yourself without affecting your opponent. Revan's blue lightsaber ignited and lifted itself off the floor once she had it in a mental grip and speared towards the prone Jedi. Ennis screamed as the blade burned a hole through her leg, but Revan wasn't about to discount the Jedi even then. She pulled on the Force and sent a surge of energy at the fallen Asari, whose screams redoubled as the lightsaber was ripped from her leg and sent tumbling over the broken ground. Revan quickly recalled the blade and made sure to grab Ennis from where it had fallen and clipped both to her belt. Striding forward with only her red saber in hand, Revan addressed the Jedi, "You fought well. Especially for someone that is not purely dedicated to a martial path." "Don't mock me, Sith." Ennis ground out past the pain. "I failed and you bested me, just kill me already." "Kill you? Now why would I do that when I can finally have a conversation with your order that you cannot end by simply attacking me anymore? So it's to be torture then? Do your worst. I will not betray my sisters." Revan withheld a sigh. It seemed even these knockoff Jedi didn't believe a Sith could have a conversation without the threat of pain or violence. Ironic because she had turned far more people to her side through words than she ever did through threats. If Ennis had paid attention to how Revan secured the Geth and Quarians, she would have understood that. "I don't need you to betray them. Soon enough, If they are smart, they will come to me. Enna's face darkened. I'm to be bait? This time Revan did sigh. Jedi could be so self-important. The galaxy is at war for its very survival. I would hope your order would recognize that eventually they will need to at least cooperate or be destroyed one by one. We would never work with a Sith. So you would rather condemn everyone else to die then? Ennis fell silent. We don't have to fight, Revan said, letting the Force carry the sincerity of her words. I don't even need you to do more than be an observer to our true enemy. Come with me and see the horrors the Reapers have for all life they come across and honestly report it to your order. I'll even swear no harm will come to you and you will be free to investigate as you wish. Revan almost had her, she could feel it. Most Jedi simply wanted to do their duty to protect. Giving them an opportunity to do so in a harmless way was an easy sacrifice for the Sith Empress, and more often than not it allowed her to gently coax them towards her stance. So it was doubly irritating when Revan's senses screamed for her to get back as an empty air car crashed in front of her, accompanied by the roar of a dropship's engines. It exploded and Revan was forced further back from the downed Jedi Master. It seemed the Knight and Padawan had decided to come back against Enna's orders. In hindsight, Revan should have expected that, but she would have to beat herself up over the mistake some other time. The pale-faced Padawan, Janini, if Revan remembered correctly, was behind the controls, but Revan ignored her in favor of focusing on the Knight and whatever the hells she was doing. The Force surged in response to the Asari reaching her hands out and pulling. The walls around Revan rumbled and cracked, giving the Sith Empress barely a moment's notice before they collapsed on top of her. Rocks and debris bounced off the Force barrier she threw up, but more and more poured down until the Sith had been buried completely. The Sith fully expected some sort of follow-up as sweat dripped down her forehead from the strain of holding several tons of rock from crushing her, but nothing came. And a Jedi with time to prepare was a dangerous, unpredictable thing. So Revan drew even deeper on the Force even as the first hints of burnout started to affect her and pushed the tons of rock away like it was made of styrofoam. And the second she didn't need to focus on not getting hit by the debris, Revan scanned the area for any sign of the Jedi new arrivals. Only to find that all three Force presences he could feel were above her and fleeing in the opposite direction. The younger Asari had taken the wounded master and fled. How surprisingly tactical of them. Revan activated her helmet's comms. Harawa 01, this is Empress Revan. I need... Oh Keela, Empress, you have incredible timing. We were just about to contact you. The comms operator interrupted frantically. It all happened too fast, what do we do? Revan looked silently at the rapidly disappearing shuttle. In moments it would disappear among the normal sky traffic in the city or simply land, and she would lose track of the three Jedi entirely. But it sounded like she might have more urgent issues for now. Very well. Ennis Delisa and the two others could escape and bring the warning Revan initially gave to the rest of the Order. Revan would deal with them later if need be. Calm down and tell me what happened, she instructed the hysteric Quarian. Sorry, of course, we just received word from the scout fleet that the Reapers have moved beyond Batarian space. Invasion groups were seen heading towards Palavan, Ilium, Earth, and several other major planets. So the invasion was beginning in earnest then. Send a shuttle to my location and prepare the fleet for departure. It seems we are done here. Oh. Jane Shepherd looked out her window down at the London skyline and did her best to quell the knot of frustration that had been building in her chest for the past few months. She had thought, and at some level still did, that turning herself over to the Systems Alliance after the debacle at the Alpha Relay was the right thing to do. That she needed to be accountable for her actions in destroying a Batarian colony along with a whole damned solar system, even if it was necessary to stop the Reapers from strolling in through the galaxy's back door. But as she wasted her time being grounded and shuffled from meeting to meeting only to reiterate things she had already discussed to oblivion and back, she was getting tired of it all. Motion on a nearby building caught her eye, and she idly watched a young boy run around a rooftop garden playing with a model ship. Was this what Revan felt when working with her? Feeling frustrated because despite there being a clear goal in front of them that even an idiot should be able to see, she was held back by the people surrounding her focusing on the wrong things? She hoped not. Especially because the Sith's lessons on politics and meditation were a large reason Shepard hadn't begun climbing the walls after certain meetings. And as the months dragged on, the former commander found herself missing the blonde elf more and more. The occasional talks they had, the debates around their respective leadership styles, Revan teaching her how to use that ridiculously cool laser sword. She closed her eyes and shoved away from the window just as the door behind her opened. A quick look showed it was Lieutenant James Vega, an Alliance Marine that had been Shepard's guard/watcher since her arrest. He was a good guy, if a little too enthusiastic with the protein powder. "Commander," James said, snapping a salute at her. Shepard smiled. "You aren't supposed to call me that anymore, James." Not that it had ever stopped him before. "Not supposed to salute you either," the burly Marine replied, completing their little greeting ritual before getting serious. "We've got to go. The Defense Committee wants to see you." Sounds important. Shepard mused and began following after the lieutenant. Maybe this meeting would actually get something done.